Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast Weekend Preview. And next week, everyone will be in the playoffs. Without a doubt, I'm pretty sure by next week...
Or out.
Or out of the playoffs, I suppose. I just assume that every single one of our listeners is in the playoffs. It's just a nice thing I do. I envision every single one of you making the playoffs in every single one of your leagues. That's how kind of a person I am.
You know, if you're listening to us, hopefully you've made playoffs in at least one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I like to think we help. I don't know. Maybe we make things worse. I think that also,
Who knows?
I feel like all the good work we did was ruined by us killing so many big names.
It's been very hard to kind of adjust.
It's been really... I mean, at one point, my team... I mean, even now, my team is so drastically different because of the injuries from what I planned 2 weeks ago that I genuinely don't know how the playoffs are going to go post-bye week. It's weird. Like losing marks.
It's really hard to keep stock of your team when you lose multiple big players.
Yeah.
But like what you need to do to where you should even go.
Yeah, especially
points versus peripherals type stuff.
As big of the names that have gone out. I mean, we had Stamkos, we have Stone, Kreider was doing really well at one point. Rantanen. It's just there's so many names that it's so hard. Now Bishop might be out. Like there's a lot of big names, and it's been hard to really keep track. Like you're saying, like someone goes out and you don't really know where to start because, I mean, no one on the wire is ever going to be as good. And so then you start looking at other directions too. And you're like, oh, well, maybe if I drop this player who's been underperforming and pick up this other person, then I'll kind of even out. It's weird. You have to start doing a lot of mental gymnastics to try to make the math work. And then just hope for the best pretty much at the end because you haven't had stock of your team. It's weird. Okay. So let's go into 10 takes here and talk about some general hockey news. And this was a pretty busy week. There was the GM meeting and everything, but there is from the GM meeting and also just, I guess, around the world. The first thing to talk about, I guess, is what everyone else is talking about, and that's the coronavirus. And will it impact the NHL at all? As we know, the Olympics are in jeopardy. The Euros for soccer, football are in jeopardy. What else do we have that's in jeopardy here? We have EDC. We have Coachella in jeopardy. Very important there. There's a lot of things. And we know that in Serie A, which is the league in Italy, they are playing behind closed doors. If you are in a red area, which is the areas that are most contaminated, apparently, those games are canceled in Italy at the moment. And the U.S. is having quite a bit of breakouts in certain areas, especially along the West Coast. Luckily, many of the West Coast teams suck. So at the end of the day, you're probably not worrying about them for too long here because they're not going to make the playoffs. But for other teams, as this spreads, it's going to be very interesting.
At least the California teams.
Yeah, the California teams especially. And then there's a Seattle team, but it doesn't exist yet. So, you know, that also doesn't matter. But anyways, seriously, I think that it's going to be interesting, especially considering if Canada takes a different approach to the U.S., for example. That could be very interesting if Canada decides, what games can't be played or can't travel, across country lines. Probably won't happen, but, you have to prep for the worst. And like the NHL said in their GM meeting, post-GM meeting, they said, they pretty much said, like, we're not going to overreact right now. We're going to take things as they are. Right now, they have barred NHL employees from going anywhere outside of North America. So that's the first step they've taken. But they are not expanding that to the clubs. So the only reason I'm talking about this so much is because this could have an impact on playoffs. And coincidentally, there's only been 2 times ever the Stanley Cup has not been raised. One of those is during Spanish flu, way back in the day. Just a little bit. None of us were alive. But there has been a time when, because of this isn't going to happen, but just something to think about, that if there becomes travel restrictions or anything like that, things could get very interesting here for the NHL. And this is such a crucial period for both us in fantasy and for the real players. And it's going to get very, very interesting to see what happens. And for those of us that are normal people, wash your hands, stop touching your face, what all the doctors tell you to do, and help out. Because it may not be super serious, but the less you spread it around, the less the people who are at risk of dying are kind of saved, I guess.
I'm just rubbing my face on all surfaces.
Of course you are. I know. I mean, I'm not. You probably went and grabbed your cat, rubbed the cat on your face, grabbed your baby, rubbed the baby on your face.
I was rubbing my face while you were telling me not to rub my face.
I know. I'm not surprised at all. I'm
speaking of
not shocked
faces.
Oh yes.
I would suggest not watching the Johnny Boychuk skate video, but I'm assuming if you haven't heard of it or what happened yet, Arturi Lekkonen's skate came up, caught Boychuk like directly in the face, basically on the eye. And Boychuk's initial thought was that he lost his eye. Turns out he got as lucky as you can call a guy that needs 90 stitches, but he got lucky in that he didn't lose his eyesight. It cut his eyelid. And I would assume, there's probably, thankfully there are no pictures, but I think a lot of those stitches are probably detail work around his eye, because stitching an eyelid is not the same as stitching, an arm or a chin or something. So lots of work. And he actually made a joke. He tweeted saying, I'm fine, and sorry I haven't updated everybody. My facial recognition on my phone wasn't working. It's like, Boychuk.
That's top tier banter right there.
Yeah.
Big fan.
So he's as fine as you can be, but obviously out for a while. But it was again, I assume some of you will be morbidly curious, but for those of you that are, I wouldn't even say squeamish, because there is no blood. It's just not, you can feel it. Is the easiest way to put it. You can feel it by watching. It's just bad.
Didn't he also get cut in the neck last year?
I don't remember. I don't know if it was the neck. I can't remember.
I thought it was like the neck area that he got cut last year. But my weirdest thing to that video was when I watched it, because I didn't know that it was that bad. Like, it just said, "Oh my god, like what just happened to Johnny Boychuk?" And I was like, "Okay, what is this?" I had no like the context, the caption or whatever didn't talk about the skate to the face, and I saw it hit his face, and I was like, there wasn't any blood, and I feel like my first reaction was, is he faking it? And then second reaction was like, is he all right? Because he's just like, there's no blood, he's just checking, and I thought, okay, he's gonna see that there's no blood and then run away, and it's like, okay, close call, and then he just like runs off the ice. I was so confused. Yeah. Like, without context,
doesn't even go to the bench, he just like leaves.
Without context, I was like, what is happening? But I don't know. I guess I don't know. I just thought, okay, cool. He got the brunt of the edge of the skate like into his face. I was like, okay, it didn't cut him. It's probably just a really bad bruise or something. Coincidentally, I was talking to my brother about it, and I was like, yeah, there was no, and he saw it, and he was like, oh, there's no blood. So I guess he was okay. He's like, he probably thought he had a cut, and he was looking for blood. And I told him something about his eye, and he was like, no, dude, if his eye had fallen out, he would have felt it. Like, yes, I'm not talking about the eye falling out. That can't happen. Anyways, just a random aside. Okay, let's move on to my next one here, the third take of the day. Tarasenko is skating and traveling.
Yes, he is.
He's taking contact, apparently. So just a heads up for people, if you have an IR plus slot or an IR slot that you can add directly to, Tarasenko may be a good grab here, because St. Louis has a pretty decent end of the season schedule.
You know who else is skating is Mikko Rantanen, but he's skating with a non-contact jersey.
Yeah.
The fact that he's skating is a good step.
They also
I still don't know that it means he's going to be anywhere near ready.
They did put out a report recently too that said he's at least 2 more weeks.
Okay.
So yeah.
So if you get him back, you'll have to be in a league that plays till the end, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of whether to hold on to players or not, now is the time that you can drop your long-term holds that haven't really panned out. I feel like Frederick Anderson is the name that comes up a lot. I don't really see a path to him being the billing that he was at the beginning of the season. He's still going to get like decent saves and a lot of start volume, and wins. But if you're not in a league that counts saves and wins, I feel like there's better options at this point. I mean, I'd rather have a Khudobin, especially while Bishop's hurt. I'd rather have Saros or Crawford at this point. Yeah. I feel like in averages leagues, I would rather give up the edge in wins for the save percentage and goal against average benefits from other goaltenders lately.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I feel like this is one he's gonna have like 6 shutouts in a row or something after this, but
especially in standard leagues, I mean, he's not going to get you a shutout most likely, because I mean the Leafs let in a goal every single game, it seems like, except for that one shutout he got recently. But I mean, shutouts, throw them out the window. And then, like you said, you're sacrificing wins, which, mind you, the Leafs are not getting recently. So, like, that's also kind of a questionable thing right now, which is a little bit different to Bobrovsky, which is interesting. Bobrovsky is, in my opinion, still close to a drop. But the thing is, he at least has that upside where, like, occasionally he can have a pretty good game and get you the W
I would
still.
drop him in a redraft league in a heartbeat for Crawford or Soros.
Yeah, I know. What I'm saying, though, is that Anderson is very different to Bob in the regard of, like, his save percentage and goals against average is really low, probably lower than Bob's recently, actually. I haven't taken a look, but I think it's lower than Bob's. And the wins just also haven't been there, whereas at least Florida's winning games sometimes. But they're similar. They are very similar goaltenders, and that, like you said, I think right now I'd rather have, it's crazy, but I'd rather have Saros. I'd rather have Francouz. I'd rather have Qdobin if Bishop is out long term. There's a lot of goaltenders that I'd rather have right now, which is a really big thing, I think, going into the playoffs here, because if you were in any kind of goalie trouble, this is huge for you. You can fix one big area going into the playoffs. Okay. My next one here, the fifth take, is about the Ottawa Senators. They fired their CEO for, I don't know, being passionate, I guess, and wanting to make the team better. The CEO released a statement saying, I had a discussion. The funniest thing to me is that it happened on Valentine's Day, and he felt the need to say he had a discussion with Eugene Melnyk on Valentine's Day. I don't know why he needed to specify that this happened on Valentine's Day, but that was an important part of his story. And apparently it got heated, and he said he used some curse words, which, I don't know. I guess I'm spoiled in that the places I've worked at, it's not that uncommon to curse at your supervisor if you disagree with them.
Pretty much constantly around us, but
yeah, pretty much constantly at the places I've been at. And I understand that's not everywhere, but I don't know. It sounds to me like he used that language, but that they were not seeing eye to eye in how to grow the franchise and where to go. That's what it seemed like from his statement. But I think it's pretty hilarious that if that's the case, Eugene Melnyk yet again punt something out that wants to get better. So that's the sense for you. They are a team.
It'll always be fun over there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Sixth take here. So that Russian line that we kind of hinted at as a possibility seems to be happening on and off. This is 2 games in a row now that Kovalchuk has seen time at even strength on a line with Ovechkin and Kuznetsov, swapping in for Wilson here and there. I don't know if we'll see more of that or not, but I'm in some fairly deep leagues, and it's making me want to hang on to Kovalchuk just a little bit longer, despite the fact he's getting plenty of reasons to drop him. I still would drop him in, a normal 12-person league, but I would have my eye on him in case that actually starts to go somewhere, especially if he winds up getting more power play time.
Yeah, especially with Washington's schedule, they have a pretty good schedule.
Yeah.
I can't believe that actually happened. I can't believe you were right on that. It makes me so mad.
Rightish, halfish.
Rightish. Whatever. My seventh take here. The cap is increasing apparently next year to $88.2 million. So by some wiggle room, the Senators actually have cap space now to do things. That seems like a pretty
big jump, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm excited for the Senators to actually be able to sign some players because, they're so close to the cap ceiling right now.
I bet Toronto's happy.
Toronto's thrilled, I bet. But even then, they still don't have that much space.
Yeah, I mean, they're currently at a $95 million hit. So
Toronto's a brilliant experiment of how do we have 4 elite superstars and then third liners everywhere else. I know
they're a brilliant experiment of how do you circumvent the cap.
That too. How do you circumvent the cap and use rookies and close? Oh, well, I think one interesting thing too that they're doing though is that when you look at like the Marner deals and the Matthews deals and whatnot, they're also an experiment on what happens when you shorten your cup window. Because I feel like cup windows in the past used to be like these 7-8 year cup windows because you'd sign, for example, a Crosby or an Ovechkin or whatever to like 10-year deals. And so your cap window was somewhere in the middle there and it would be around 8 years. And now we're looking at teams like you look at, for example, I mean, Toronto's the best example. There's a few other teams, Colorado, I guess. But you look at a team like Toronto and like their cup window's more like 5 years at the moment. Like they're real, like, let's use all our elite talent to get a cup is kind of like 5 years. Because it's going to be tough to re-sign Matthews and Marner and Nylander once their deals are up. And because Tavares isn't going anywhere, right? So I think that's the most interesting thing. And Tavares will be way older, 4 years down, 5 years down the line. And we've already gone, like maybe a year into this whole 5-year window, in my opinion. So that's, to me, what's the most interesting thing about their situation from a cap perspective.
feel like Vegas is one of the other ones that's
they're also sacrificing future for kind of like this 5-year window, win a cup immediately.
they're kind of. I think they. I don't know. They're not as top loaded. At least they've got a lot of $6 to $7 million deals or $5 to $7 million deals, so they'll have a little bit more flexibility.
That's true. That is fair.
But they do have a lot of like medium term contracts at this point. Yeah. I guess long term for the current era. Six-ish.
Yeah, I could see a team that could maybe be that eventually is the Carolina Hurricanes in time. Like Dougie Hamilton, you have Aho, you have Nate Cash, you have Turbo. They have a pretty solid core, and they're all going to need contracts around the same time. They're all young, and so they may need to do something pretty similar.
Yeah. Okay. My next take here is, don't forget that the Anaheim-St. Louis makeup game is on Wednesday. So you gotta have to our off nights tool. In fact, maybe we can update that now that I think about it, but our off nights tool doesn't show that. I think a handful of other I swear I didn't even see it in the Yahoo game breakdown. You can set the lines and it shows you on the day, but if I remember right when I was looking, I didn't see it there. But anyway, so that's an extra start for your Anaheim and St. Louis players because it is on an off night, which is nice. So they're going to be playing, again, Wednesday. They're both having back-to-back, so it's going to be a sludge game. But extra start, always good stuff.
Always good, and St. Louis' schedule next week is unbelievably good.
Yeah.
Phenomenally good.
I mean, still, I feel like the whole playoffs really is one of the best schedules we've ever had for fantasy. Because, I mean, I personally don't bench at all in any of my leagues.
Yeah, same.
Which is pretty nice.
It's crazy. I think I benched once, and that's it. And it's pretty insane to me it was so easy to do. I didn't even really have to pay attention to it. It just kind of happened. And
yeah, same.
It's been crazy. Okay, next one here for me is about Leon Draisaitl. And this is another opportunity for me to say I was wrong on Draisaitl. I remember I said I don't think he's going to be going that high, and I also was worried about them getting split up. And since they split him up, Dry has gotten better. So I am happy here to say I was entirely wrong on Leon Draisaitl. And what's kind of crazy, and I'm curious to see if this happens next year, someone actually plotted Nikita Kucherov and Leon Draisaitl's power play points across the season, and they're almost identical. Same with their overall points. Leon Draisaitl this year is virtually exactly Kucherov from last year, which is pretty crazy. It's pretty interesting at the rate that they literally gain points exactly the same for the most part, which is just nuts, but also gives you just a level of how amazing Draisaitl has been. And to that extent, I might even say he's a little underrated. We've seen obviously Evolving Wild's ridiculous takes that, he's not. And of course, I think it's a joke.
Shushkin should be a heart candidate over.
I think it's a joke.
Over Draisaitl.
But Draisaitl was
that was not a joke. That was not a joke.
I think it turned into a joke, but they were also serious.
It was never a joke. They were never kidding about it.
Whatever. Anyways, it was just a terrible take, and because of that, and I think because of some of the analytics, saying he's bad on defense, I almost feel like he's underrated. Kucherov last year was the unanimous Hart winner. And just everyone was praising his play. And yet with Dry, I feel like everyone's kind of being he's a product of McDavid.
Dry's winning Hart. I mean, I would be very surprised if he doesn't.
I think that amongst most people, he's a favorite. And especially if you look at anybody's kind of Twitter that's going to be actually voting, most of them will say Dry. No questions asked, right? Some people will say McKinnon, whatever, stupid stuff. Or Markstrom, for example, which I get. Markstrom, if you take away some of the goals he saved, I think Markstrom nets them 18 points or something, 16, 18 points someone did the calculations on, which is pretty insane because that means Vancouver's well out of the playoff race and one of the worst teams. So Markstrom definitely gets a nod for that, but I think Dry is by far and away the clearest. And the fact that amongst general hockey discourse, I see a lot of, well, but is he the front runner? I mean, but absolutely he is. So that's all. Just wanted to share some praise to Leon Draisaitl and also admit that I was wrong in the preseason about Leon Draisaitl and all the opportunities where I could have grabbed him and I didn't. I regret it.
Well, as far as disappointments, the last take here is we will be doing the fantasy Razzies again at the end of the season.
Yeah.
If you listened to us last season, at the end, right when playoffs started, we had an episode where we gave basically, the worst skater, the worst disappointments, basically. Maybe we'll have a worst take from us. We'll make that something you guys can tell us what you thought.
I mean, come on.
There were some pretty bad.
There is a front runner. There's a clear front runner, and I hate you for it.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're screwed. It's already done. People are going to vote that one in for sure.
That take is the Patrick Laine of last year, who just swept everything. Patrick Laine and Jonathan Quick swept everything last year, and like everyone going into the Razzies last year knew that Laine and Quick was going to steal the show. Like everyone knew. Honestly, it was like I remember doing the show, and I was like, God, this must be so boring. It's like when you go to the Oscars and like someone just sweeps everything. This year, though, it is not as easy as it seems.
No, it's not. No, not at all. Although, unless we do that take thing,
the take thing is the clearest one. But like, think of worst player. There's a lot out there. Think of like most disappointing fantasy player. There's a lot of those too. There's a lot. We could also do this year. No, I never mind. I'm not saying it. Let's say something about injuries, but not going to go there. We have a worst front office. That one has a lot of contenders this year. There's a lot of really good ones. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be worst, most, and then we have the ultimate prize, which is the least valuable player, and we had a fan voted one, which was fun. I'm very excited to do the rest. And we didn't.
That was the most disappointing player.
And we didn't have video last year, so this year we may do some fun little video stuff where we can, I don't know, make it a little bit more like a show. Maybe I'll fly out to New York with you. We'll rent out a studio for like $50 and record it there. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That's a good 10 take. I'm so excited to do the Razzies this year. It's gonna be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's move into the weekend pickup suggestions, talk about the schedule first, and we start with the teams that have good matchups. And shockingly, the first team here is going to be Anaheim. They play Toronto and Minnesota. Both teams are going to be tired. Minnesota's not that easy of a matchup, but that means they might be getting Dubnyk, or at least a tired Minnesota team. And then Toronto, of course, tired and just not being able to stop the puck recently is a good matchup for them. So one of the few times that Anaheim actually has had a good schedule. Then you have Colorado, who plays Vancouver and San Jose. Vancouver has awful goaltending right now. Great for them. San Jose is actually kind of scary, but I don't believe it yet. So until, I don't know, Martin Jones stops doing the silly things he's doing, which I'm going to assume is soon, then this is a good schedule for Colorado. You've got St. Louis, who's playing New Jersey Devils and the Chicago Blackhawks. Good schedule for them. The Devils, even though like both teams are kind of hot right now, still like a good team to gamble on, because also St. Louis is a great schedule next week. So you could get the 2 off night starts this weekend, but there's also a lot of good things to take advantage of for next week. And then lastly, there's Minnesota, who gets both Los Angeles and Anaheim. I don't know if you can dream up a better West Coast schedule than that in terms of good matchups. Teams with bad matchups are going to be Carolina, who plays the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins, both playing, well, I guess not pretty well. They're just playing very inconsistently. That Carolina-Pittsburgh game will be huge. Both of these are massive games. All these divisional games that are coming up soon are going to be massive. And I think that also...
The Metro is just insane.
It's nuts.
Everything's up in the air now.
And one thing that we notice a lot, scoring tends to go down towards the end of the season. So one thing I think to pay attention to here especially is that I think as we get closer to the playoffs and teams are starting to make runs and starting to either keep people out of the playoffs or secure points or whatever, I think we're going to see more reserved games, less goals. And I warned people the same thing last year during the playoffs. I remember that. And overall game totals start to go down. And so I would expect games like, for example, Carolina-Pittsburgh to be pretty low scoring, as both need points pretty badly, and it's played a little bit more like a conservative playoff game as opposed to an all-out war. So that's one thing to pay attention to. Then there's Vegas, who plays Winnipeg and Calgary. Calgary has a bad schedule as they play Arizona and Vegas, so they both get each other there. And then Vancouver gets Colorado and Columbus, 2 hot teams that are hard to score on, and of course they're missing Stone, which is a big blow for them. And teams that play both off nights, Friday and Sunday this week, there's quite a few actually. There's Anaheim, Calgary, Chicago, Colorado, Detroit, St. Louis, Vancouver, and the Vegas Golden Knights. Before I jump into my first suggestion for the weekend, I want to mention that I think that this weekend is a great opportunity, if you're already ahead, to take a look at next week. Look ahead and think about what you can do for the playoffs next week if you're going to have a playoff matchup, because when you look at next week, there's not a lot to take advantage of on the weekend next week. So what you do at the beginning of next week is going to be very important. I think it's going to be much easier to gain starts or to gain an advantage by making early week pickups than not making that many or saving two, for example, for the end of the week. I think next week is a week where I would probably advocate for the scenario. Usually I like to do like 2 and 2. I do 2 early week pickups, 2 late week pickups, so that I can react. I think this next week is more of a 3-to-1 split. If you have 4 starts, for example, you do 3 early week pickups and you save 1 for that last one, just so you can chase one specific category, because you're most likely only going to have one position, because Saturday and Sunday are both heavy slates technically. So that's just an important note there, strategy wise, of what you want to be looking at for next week. So my first one is going to be, some of these are honestly hilarious, but my first one here is going to be Justin Falk, defenseman, 31% owned, been hitting like a madman and been shooting.
Yeah.
And so for peripherals, he's a pretty good option. And especially when you consider that next week, St. Louis has not only a good schedule in terms of off nights, but they also have just a very easy schedule from opponents. I think they play Anaheim, Los Angeles, San Jose, and I think it's Ottawa or Buffalo. It's just a very, very easy schedule of very bad teams. And so a guy like Justin Falk, who can get you peripherals for next week, kind of feels to me like a Ryan Reeves type pickup, where all you're going for is the peripherals and points are extra. But with peripherals, starts are king. And if Falk is going to get you 4 starts next week and 2 starts this weekend, that's a big ad.
Yep. You know what? Another player that's going to potentially do the same is, oh no, he only gets 3 starts next week. But anyway, Duncan Keith, except for the opposite reason. You're not going to get a ton of peripherals out of him unless you count blocks. But you will potentially continue to pick up the points he's been getting. He's defense, 21% owned, has off nights, and then he's got he only plays 3 games next week, but 2 off nights during that, and those 2 off nights are at home against San Jose and at home against Ottawa. So pretty good matchups for another guy that you could potentially hold on to through next week.
Yeah, and the thing next week with Chicago is they might only have 3 games, but they do have 2 off nights. So
yeah,
at least, so he does get you extra starts relative to somebody else, just maybe not as many as. But at the same time, I can't think of a better defenseman to pick up for points right now than him.
Right.
Okay, my next one here is from the Anaheim Ducks. Remember that I said that they have a great schedule this weekend, and they actually do have a decent schedule next week. They have, I think it's 2 off nights or 3 off nights next week, but they do have 4 games with that extra St. Louis game. The downside to it is that they are both back.
They've only got 1 off night next week.
Yeah,
because there's so many heavy game nights.
They're both back to back though for the Anaheim Ducks next week. So they have 4 games, but they're back to back each of the sets, which is not great, and they're not very easy games. But Ryan Getzlaf, center, 38% owned. I like him, and the schedule this weekend is fantastic. So I think for this weekend, I like him the best. Maybe not so much hold through next week. Maybe hold through the early part of the week and then swap out. But Getzlaf to me is probably one of my favorite options, at least from Anaheim. I mean, when you look at most of the teams, a lot of them do not have really great forward options, especially ones that plays many minutes as Getzlaf and kind of have the upside that he does against tired teams.
Yeah. I'll take my next 2, actually, because they're from the same team. And that team, crazy as it sounds, is Detroit, playing 2 tired teams here. So considering they get a tired, and they're both at home, so they get a tired Chicago and a tired Tampa. Now, Tampa's not exactly the easiest matchup, but still, at least they're tired and they're traveling in both cases. So Detroit, the first one is Philip Pronik, defense 19%. Decent time to take a shot on him. He still gets some peripherals, at least when he's playing, which he is again. And then Tyler Bertuzzi, left wing, right wing, 33%. Back to the top line, top power play. A decent option considering how strong their matchups are. Even though we say it's Tampa, it's Tampa playing without Vasilevsky most likely, and traveling and tired.
Yeah. Wait, was that it?
I've got more.
Oh,
do you have any?
I do have more. I just didn't know if you were done with your Detroit take. Just
I am done
stopped
with my
very
Detroit
abruptly, kind of like what it's like watching the Detroit Red Wings. Wow, this is how bad they are. That is not a shot at you. It's a shot at the Detroit Red Wings. My next one here is actually surprising. It surprised me when I wrote it down, but Danton Heinen, left wing, right wing, a 1%er. He's a better Sonny Milano. Lots of shots and decent minutes. If you're in a 1% league, I like him better than Milano. I know last week we said Milano was my favorite 1%er. Not the case anymore. I think it's Danton Heinen. He's been shooting a lot, averaging like three-ish shots a game over his last 4 games. Even though the first one he had none, and then he went 3-4-3 or something like that. But I do like Dantenheim quite a bit this weekend with the schedule they have, and he did get a 20-minute game in there somewhere. So I like him, especially at 1% in a league that deep. It's a good grab.
Yes, I got another team that I'll represent 2 players from. That's Colorado Avalanche. Vladislav Nemestikov is my first one here. Left wing, right wing, 11%. He's currently top right wing. If he loses that, which is fairly likely, then he probably falls off this list entirely. But he did get a goal so far. We're recording this Wednesday night. He's got a goal in the Anaheim, Colorado game, so that will hopefully keep him up there. But we'll see. We don't really know what to do when Burakovsky will be back and what role he's going to wind up taking. The next option is Samuel Girard, defends 27% with Makar out. There was some hinting that it was going to be Eric Johnson on top power play, but in this same game, Girard has a power play assist, so I'm assuming that means he has the top power play role. And 27%, pretty good target, especially in points leagues, because he doesn't do a whole lot else, but he's in as good a position to get points as he can be. So that's my other good option, I think.
So I'm not going to lie. I blanked out on that last one, and you only mentioned it once, and I don't have your script open. You didn't say Eric Johnson, right?
I mentioned that I don't like Eric Johnson because he was projected to be top power play and is not getting it.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like it.
Well, I was going to mention Eric Johnson just as like a heads up, 6% owned. Just like if he does end up getting that top power play spot with Makar out, just something to pay attention to through the weekend to see. For example, if you need to pick up only on Sunday, and all of a sudden Eric Johnson is now still on the top power play, I like him more. That's it. So that was my little take there. I can't believe I forgot. I was like, okay, I need to pay attention to the name he says. Need to pay attention. Mind blanked for 2 seconds. I was like, damn it, he said the name. There it goes. Terrible concentration tonight. Concentration of a squirrel. So that is it for the weekend preview.
Oh, I got one last.
Brandon has
one last one.
Man, I've done this every episode. Awful.
I got my last option is Corey Crawford. If for some reason they don't play him on Thursday and they decide to play him in the away game in Detroit, that means he'll be getting, he'll be in Detroit and then also at home against the Blues, which isn't the easiest matchup. But I just like him as an ongoing target anyway. And at 46%, that's pretty good. So it's just a player that can help you immediately and also somebody you can hang on to for later. A lot of these players seem to be that way.
Yeah. Now you're done. Now I can say goodbye to the people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people. Thank you for listening. Tune into Sit Start Saturdays. Super important one because the playoffs are coming up. And other than that, thank you for listening. Pay attention to the week preview because the playoffs are coming up, and these week previews get more and more important. Thanks for listening.
Yep. Thanks for listening.